Along the lines of either race or gender or the combination of the two. And so I don't know, I just think it's a passion that I've always had, and I've found a way to, really can't imagine doing anything with my life that did not in some way have as my specific focus working in that direction. And I've been fortunate enough to make that passion part of my vocation.
You know, it is believed that our parents, or when we are children, a lot of our ideas and ideals are formed. And going on that particular basis, I wonder, what was it like for you as, let's say, a 9-year-old child? What was growing up like for you then?
I had an amazing childhood. My parents are incredible, and I'm fortunate in that they're still with me. They had me a little bit older by that day's standards. By today, it's probably a little bit more normal, somewhat. My mom had me when she was 40. And so they are in their mid to easing up into the late 80s right now. We lived in my grandmother's house. It was a deal that my dad had to make with my grandmother to have the opportunity to have my mother's hand. Oh, there's a lot behind that, let me just say. He had some negotiating to do. And so it was a beautiful childhood with my grandmother and my parents. My mother worked. She was a teacher. She taught under segregated schooling for half of her career. She taught for a total of about 30 years. My dad was an entrepreneur. As a child, his parents were sharecroppers, and his father passed away when he was only 14. And being the eldest son, he had to be the wage earner for his family as a 14-year-old. He made the decision early on that he did not want to work, as he said, for a white man. And so he decided to have his own businesses. And by the time I came along and our family was created, he owned a very successful lumber company where he employed all of his brothers and several other people in the community. All of this, and was very successful, all of this with a third grade education. And so I grew up learning about their struggles, growing up in the Jim Crow South. I grew up understanding what they had to do to survive during that period, and how they not only survived, but thrived during the period against the odds. And so what they instilled in me from very early on was this sense of pride in who I am and who we are as a people, respect for our strength and our wits and intelligence and brilliance, and a desire to, and also really acknowledging the inequities and the unfairness that exist in our society, but oftentimes go unspoken. So they really, I think, gave me the foundation to say something is wrong and I can do something about it.
You have courage, obviously, and I can feel your passion. Among or between your two parents, your mom and your dad, who would you say you got what from?
Well, it's very funny because they are very different personalities. Very different. Okay, so my mom, and she is a chip off my grandmother's block. Those two are like female versions of Nat Turner. Okay,
Oh, okay.
they don't play. Okay, they are like on 100 all the time. Um, so yeah, they're very proud,
Uh-huh. Yeah.
very proud. Have a great deal of dignity, very strong, very vocal in their opinion. Um, do not shrink away from challenges and really oh my God, let me give you just a quick example of my mom, for example. As I mentioned, she was a teacher. At least half of her career, she taught in segregated schooling. But by the time I came along, they had integrated the schools. And so I just remember her constant battles with her principal in the integrated system. And her continuing mantra of her, daring him to fire her because she couldn't wait to sue him, that type of personality.
Wow.
Whereas my father, very, he was, as I mentioned, he was a brilliant businessman, very compassionate, very family oriented, not only took care and through his business was able to support not only us, but all of the families that he employed, but also took care of his mother till the day that she died. Every week when he wrote a check to his employees, he wrote a check to his mother. So he was just a stalwart family man, but he also had a great deal of emotional intelligence. He could get along and does to this day get along with anybody. I think one of his secrets to success as a business person was the fact that he was able to formulate relationships with so many different people, a wide array, very diverse set of individuals from, everyone loves him and respects him. And so the sort of fiery part of me, that person who will fight the battles till the very last breath, my grandmother and my mother, and the ability to sort of feel comfortable in any space and be able to exchange conversation and really get along with most people, I think comes from my dad's very, very sharp sense of emotional intelligence.
I am curious about these two matriarchs you spoke so highly of, your mom and your grandmother.
Yeah.
And the Nat Turner's reference. If you were to sort of were to be present whilst the two of them and maybe some other matriarchs in your family, but especially the two of them, were telling some of the younger generations, the younger women in your family about life through some stories, what particular stories you think the two of them will tell?
Well, I'll start with my grandmother because my grandmother had a huge impact on me growing up. Because as I mentioned, my mother worked, she was a teacher. And so when I was real little, before I went to school, she was my primary caretaker. So I spent most of my childhood time really with her. And first of all, she fascinated me because it wasn't anything that she couldn't do. I was just amazed by her. She could do everything under the sun, whether or not it was considered women's work or quote unquote men's work. She could do it. I mean, let me just give you a quick example. Like I grew up in a very rural area. And so every summer, sort of the biggest excitement that would happen around my house was when there was a snake, right? And so, oh my God, it's a snake, like the world's gonna end, there's a snake out there. So these are this is how the snake incidents would always be solved. Okay, notice that all the Black children in my class, we all had brown eyes. So I went home with a revelation. I put 2 and 2 together in my little 5-year-old mind, and I figured, hey, wait a minute. Grandma has green eyes, and she has really, really light skin. So she must be white. And I was really excited because I thought I had figured out something. So I went and I told Grandma my great deduction, and she was appalled. She was so upset with me. She didn't speak to me for 2 weeks. For 2 weeks, she would, and I apologized profusely over and over again. finally she forgave me. But I will say that that experience really showed me that I should be proud of who I am, that I should not aspire to something that I'm not, that frankly, whiteness was in no way better than what I was. In fact, it was nothing to really aspire to at all. And so she, through that very real example, helped to show me how beautiful we are in our own skin and how we should be happy with that and proud of that. My mother just, she's just been always the type of person who is a leader. I mean, was always one of the best teachers in her school. She was an advocate for the teachers. Whenever someone was having some sort of problem with the principal, she would speak up for them and would dare the principal to do anything about it. And so that sort of boldness, that sort of self-imposed sort of leadership and that advocacy on behalf of other people, that really comes from her. So I have to thank them both for that.
I am so tempted to ask you the next question because based on your background, you're usually on the spot. So I'm going to put you on the spot. What is your magic?
That is on the spot question. What is my magic? I don't know. I think my magic is that I just deeply am sort of blessed to be able to live within my purpose. That's my magic, is that I'm unafraid to do what I know I was sent here to do. And that really is something special, because I really believe that everybody knows deep down what their purpose is. And everybody, even though they try to say they don't, I think you do. That little thing that you were always enamored with as a child, that little thing that you wanted to do before somebody told you that you couldn't, that's your purpose. And I think the difference, my particular magic, is that I'm not afraid to go for that. I'm not afraid to make that real. I'm not afraid to try and fail and try again. That is my magic.
If you had a motto, what would it be?
Oh, well, my favorite, I don't know if it's a motto, but I would definitely say my favorite quote is actually a Frederick Douglass quote, that power concedes nothing without demand. And I truly believe that. As putting back on my advocacy hat, I certainly understand that nothing in this nation, and most likely in the world, but specifically focusing on the African American experience and coming from the history that I come from and coming from the centuries of oppression that my ancestors has faced from this country, I understand that we have achieved nothing in this country because somebody just woke up one day and decided to give it to us. Everything that we have been able to open up in this country, not only for African Americans, but quite frankly, for all people of color, women, LGBT community, everyone, all of those oppressed individuals or people who would have been oppressed given the mores of this country, the challenges that we faced and our courage to stand up and fight against that opened up doors for us and for others as well. And so I think that's something that, I'm proud of and that I embrace and that I understand needs to be a continual thing, because progress is never sort of a one-way street. Progress always tends to be a 2 steps forward and 1 step back scenario. We're seeing that right now in terms of voting rights. We're about to go down and celebrate the 50th anniversary of the Selma March. But at the same time, we have millions of people who are disenfranchised in this country because of felony disenfranchisement laws, because of the voter ID laws, other things that are afoot across this country to make it more difficult for people to vote, notwithstanding the Supreme Court decision that struck down part of the Voting Rights Act. So I understand that those battles that were fought and we thought won decades ago, we're now losing again. And we have to get back on the horse and fight those battles some more. And so I know that no one's going to give it to us. We have to demand it, we have to act, and we have to make it happen.
Where do you draw your strength from to keep you going, especially when it seems as though the odds are stacked against you? Why do you continue?
Yeah, I get a lot of strength in my history. Ever since I was a child, just a huge lover of Black history. And I get a lot of strength from that, knowing that our ancestors faced even more difficult and horrendous odds. and still had the audacity and the strength and the courage to stand up and fight. And if they could do it under those circumstances, there's no way I would even imagine not doing everything that I can do under much more, much less dire circumstances, quite frankly. For the most part, I know that I'm not going to, get possibly lynched for speaking out against someone. But I understand that there were those who knew that could happen to them and did it anyway. And for respect of the blood that was spilled for me, I have to continue that fight. I just see that as my responsibility.
That's a big enough why. Let's take a break, a short break. We'll be back with more from Dr. Avis Jones DeWeever. We are back with Dr. DeWeever. Dr. DeWeever, what are some ways the issues of privilege, power, and policy in the U.S. negatively impact the personal and professional development of Black women?
That's a big thing to unpack. First, I'll say in terms of this issue of privilege, I'm largely speaking about white privilege, about male privilege, about specifically white male privilege, a particular thing in and of itself. In the workplace, there's been a lot of discussion recently around Sheryl Sandberg's book, for example, Lean In. And the main thesis of that book is that really the main thing that's keeping women back from pushing into greater levels of leadership in the corporate world is that women are sort of holding themselves back. They're not being a part of the integral conversations. They're not taking a seat at the table in terms of in terms of boardroom. They are not pushing forward in their careers because they're anticipating the need to spend more time at home. So they're not really fully committed to the workplace. My challenge to that thesis is that her narrative is a very, in my experience, a white woman's narrative, just to be very frank. Black women have always leaned into the workplace. Quite frankly, Black women have always worked in this country, even when that work was raising white women's children. And so we have a very different experience, a very different context in the American workplace, where we have to navigate not only challenges related to gender, potential issues of sexism in the workplace, we also have to challenge or face challenges as it relates to race. And we are in a particular challenge in that when the majority of the leadership in most corporations are white male, we don't have a space of commonality. So for example, white women have a space of commonality based on whiteness. Those white male leaders have mothers, they have daughters, they have sisters, they have wives. So they have an area of sort of comfortable relatability with white women, even if they have an issue with sexism, right? But on the other hand, Black men at least have this issue of maleness, this relatability issue of maleness. They might face racism, and oftentimes they do face racism. But at least they can have this point of commonality, this place where maybe they can talk about a particular sporting event, or maybe they can go and play golf with this person. So there is at least a point of commonality there in terms of their maleness. With Black women in particular, and this is true for all women of color, there is no point of commonality. So you don't have it in terms of gender, you don't have it in terms of race. And then with Black women specifically, there are particular stereotypes that relate to us, that relate to our perceived ability, that relate to our perceived place in the workforce. And so those are special challenges that we have to overcome. And so what I try to do in my research and in my book is try to determine, well, how do we overcome those very particular challenges when we don't have those spaces of commonality, when we have to break through these stereotypes like the angry Black woman moniker that even the most successful of us face. Look at what happened with Sandra Rhimes in terms of, the New York Times article that called her a angry Black woman, and here she is, the most successful person, male, female, of any color, on television today. And so, I try to sort of unpack how do we sort of deal with those stereotypes? How do we navigate those challenges that we might face as relates to race and gender and still make our way to the top? And I will have to say that even though opportunities in terms of the numbers do appear to be constrained for us, there are a lot of areas that we can sort of move into and that many have already moved into. And I'm excited about being able to help people understand how they can move further in their careers in spite of the challenges that they face.
You know, I'm curious about this whole moniker of the angry black woman or the angry black man. Do you think that black women, let's stay specifically with black women, have been cornered and in a sort of a psychological way where there's this fear of not wanting to be labeled as the angry black woman, so she in turn does not perform at her best, or does not respond or react to certain accusations, certain attacks, because of this fear of being labeled as an angry black woman? That's one part of the question. The other part, on the other hand, is this a default reaction or label that whites do because they know that, or they feel that black women suffer from this sort of thing?
I'll start from the last answer, from the last question first. I think it's a default reaction because a lot of white people are scared of blackness, period. Okay? They are intimidated by blackness. They fear our strength. And they misinterpret our strength for potential aggression. As it relates to black women in particular, it mirrors that reality. People are fearful of us. That's why that sort of angry black woman moniker exists. But also there have been entire industries that have been built off of sensationalizing that. So for example, when you look at the whole sort of housewives and reality TV franchise, I mean, some of the most successful ones take that stereotype and blow it up out of proportion. And if you are someone who has never spent any real time around black women, that is going to be your perception of what a black woman is. And, the typical black woman is not needy. That's not the typical black woman, but that's going to be your perception of who we are. If that's all you see, is you see this character blown up larger than life, and you believe that's what black women are. So you're fighting against this unreasonable fear, quite frankly, that whites have of blacks, and I think that is true. And I'm not just saying that. There's research behind this as relates to unconscious bias. So there is an unreasonable, illogical fear that whites tend to have of blacks. And then you have a whole culture that has monetized that fear through the whole reality TV industry. And that does put checks on how black women feel that they have the ability to behave or navigate their spaces in work environments. And for some people, that can, if they don't understand how to manage that issue, it can really limit their ability to excel because they self-edit too much, right? The reality is, if you're going to be an effective manager, if you're going to be an effective leader, you do have to show a degree of ambition, right? You do have to show ambition. You do have to be aggressive. You do have to hold people to goals and timetables, and make sure that you lead your team in a way that is going to, elicit respect. And you can't really do that if you're, Miss Meek, right? It's very hard to do that. Now, all women, no matter the race, are at somewhat of a disadvantage here, because certain qualities that men might exhibit related to leadership might be seen as a good thing. Being seen as being ambitious, being seen as being aggressive as a leader typically is characterized as good traits for a man. For women, oftentimes not so much, right? For women, oftentimes that's characterized maybe as being a B, right? Or something else. the very same characteristics. But with Black women, as I mentioned, it's taken up a notch because you have this angry moniker. And I'll give you one example of how a couple of my interviewees have handled that situation. They know for a fact that they have to produce the same, frankly, we all know, better results than their peers to get, to go up half as far. So they can't allow their teams not to be managed. They can't allow themselves to be respected as a leader so that they can make sure that they lead the charge for their team. So when something needs to be said, they say it, but it's an issue of how you say it. And it's an issue of saying it maybe sometimes with a smile. But the bottom line is you have to say what needs to be said. It also requires maintaining control of your emotions at all times. Don't let them see you sweat, but definitely say what needs to be said, because at the end of the day, you will be judged on the outcomes. You'll be judged on the performance. And so you need to make sure that your team gets the message that they need to get to produce the outcomes that you need to produce.
Having said that, what are your deepest concerns, your deepest fears for Black women in America today?
Oh my God. There are a lot of them. And I could talk about them in terms of categories. Economically, we're suffering tremendously. We have an excruciatingly low level of wealth. Recent research has suggested, for example, that the median wealth for Black women is only a single $100 bill.
Wow.
$100 bill. And let me be very specific about what I'm talking about with wealth, because sometimes people confuse wealth with income. Obviously, I'm not talking about income. Wealth is how much you have, the value of what you have when you take the value of everything that you have, your cash, your assets, everything that you have, you take that value and then you subtract everything that you owe. So what do you have left? It could be a minus number, important. But the median, meaning that half of Black women in America have more, half of Black women in America have less. The number right in the middle there is only $100. By comparison, for white women, it's $46,000.
Wow.
For women, it's about $16,000. So Black women are way behind when it comes to this issue of wealth. So what does that mean in terms of how that impacts our lives? That means that we are living paycheck to paycheck. The vast majority of us are living paycheck to paycheck. And if anything happens to disrupt that income stream, if you only have $100 in the bank, you can barely buy a week's worth of groceries. If your car breaks down, how are you going to be able to afford to fix it? I mean, there are, we are living on that. Too many of us are really living on a financial edge. That's one area that I worry about. Another area that I worry about is just plain our exposure to violence. We don't really talk about this a lot in America, and it's critical. It's these are some of the points that I raised on a report that I did last year called the Status of Black Women in the U.S., where we looked at how Black women fared on a variety of issues. But some of the most striking to me was the issue of exposure to violence. As it stands today, no woman in America is more likely to be assaulted than a Black woman. No woman in America is more likely to be raped than a Black woman. No woman in America is more likely to be murdered, either from a stranger or from someone that she loves and trusts, than a Black woman. We are under attack in America, and nobody talks about it. It is a tragedy that goes around routinely unacknowledged. The degree to which Black women's very existence is being under attack in this country. If white women were being killed at the rate that Black women are being killed, there would be a national strategy to combat that and protect white women. But it does not happen for us. That's a problem. I would say the third area that I worry is the degree to which our girls are facing challenges that oftentimes go unacknowledged. I will have to say, I love my president. I'm gonna preface what I'm gonna say next by saying I love my president. I can't wait for my president. I'm happy that he's there. And I love to see I'm loving the new Barack that we see after the midterms. I mean, I wish I would have had that the entire 6 years. I mean, he's got this new boldness, this new swagger that I'm loving. But I will say that, there was a bit of controversy when he introduced his My Brother's Keepers program, because there was not an analogous look at, well, what are some of the situations for girls of color? I just think that we need to not forget that though our boys face very significant challenges in this country, no doubt about it, as the mother of sons, I understand it, and I want those things to be addressed and recognized. But I think that we oftentimes assume that our girls are okay. And I will have to say that nothing could be further from the truth. A few years ago, I worked with an organization right in New York called the Black Women for Black Girls Giving Circle, where I did a report for them on the conditions of Black girls in New York. And there were some just very stunning findings there, the degree to which they have to face issues of violence. Just walking back and forth to school for our girls sometimes is a life-threatening activity. The degree to which they have this responsibility, adult-like responsibilities at a young age. When your parents are working 2 and 3 jobs just to be able to put food on the table, who's taking care of the younger siblings? 9 times out of 10, it's the girls. So you have girls here who are 9, 10 children themselves, having to act like they're the mom at home, who's really under attack when it comes to, frankly, sexual predators, and sexual predators that sometimes are in their own families. It's our girls. So, all of those things are issues that I hope that we don't forget when we focus on the concerns that Black boys face. Our girls face serious concerns too. And just 2 more data points. The fastest growing demographic in the juvenile justice system is Black girls. As it relates to being suspended from school, the only, Black girls are suspended and are tracked into the school to prison pipeline at a higher degree than any other girls, and are and higher than most other boys, with the exception of Black boys. So yeah, our Black boys are catching it, but our girls are catching it too, and they deserve specific attention as well.
Why do you believe that is not, there isn't a more community outcry against that, against what's happening to young Black girls?
I'm so glad you asked that question. I'm glad you asked that question. It's sad. I've given a lot of thought to that, because even when you look at all of the tragedies that we all are so familiar with, the Trayvon Martins and the Michael Browns and the Eric Gartners, there's the, Ayanna Jones, for example. I mean, there are Isha McBride. There are tragedies that deal with Black women too who are killed. And I can't remember not one march, not one hashtag around dead Black girls. Not even our own people. And so not one civil rights organization. Let's keep it real. Where were they when our girls were killed by police? It's not just, it's like there's a formula. It's, people like to be photographed with mothers grieving sons, but I know that there are mothers and fathers grieving daughters.
Why are we missing this?
So I think about that, and I think, well, we live in a patriarchal society, mm-hmm. and to the extent that we are a microcosm of that society, unfortunately, we are mirroring that behavior where we privilege the pain associated that men suffer, and don't privilege the pain that girls suffer. It's sad to say, but that's the only explanation that I can come up with, because it just makes no sense to me otherwise.
Why is closing the racial wealth gap, a priority for national economic security?
That is huge. I'm glad you raised that one too. Golly. I gave you a little bit of an insight on that when I talked about Black women and our wealth, but generally speaking, the Black community falls way behind the white community when it comes to wealth. And the reason why it's critical for our national security is because our nation is changing. The demographics of this nation is changing. In only about a generation's time, we are going to be a nation that is majority people of color. Okay. And so if we want to be able to continue to compete in a global marketplace at a high level, then we have to have a workforce and a human capital that is able to compete at that level and continue to propel this country forward economically. If the vast majority of our nation is living paycheck to paycheck, where's the space for innovation? Where's the space for really being able to have exposure to high quality education and being the next sort of person who's going to come up with that next thing that the whole world wants to buy and is going to drive the economic engines of this country? You know, I would hate for us to end up with a South Africa-like situation where you have a majority, Black majority, or a majority of people of color, and a very, very small white minority that is just running everything economically. And then there's this huge gulf between the haves and the have-nots. And that is the that's the direction that we're going in. And if we want to really be able to create a nation that continues to flourish, we can't afford to leave people of color behind, because we're going to be the majority of Americans in the very, very near future.
Let me go to the chat room for a second. Jen said, how long have you been working as an advocate, and what do you enjoy most about it?
So I've been in this space officially not golly. I consider myself a lifelong advocate. When I was a kid, I don't know if any of your listeners and viewers remember the show Good Times.
Oh, I remember Good Times.
I used to love Good Times. Well, I was told as I was a kid, I remember this, that I was like a female version of Michael.
Oh, okay.
I've always been an advocate. Like, I guess officially, like in DC terms, nearly 20 years now. And what was that second half of that question?
What do you enjoy most about it?
What I enjoy most about it is I love it when we win, and I love it when we fight the good fight and we stop others from doing the cray stuff that they really want to do. And I love it when we expose injustices, because even if we don't always win, I feel like that if we weren't there, things would be a whole lot worse than they are, because you would be shocked to know the extreme stupidity that some folks really want to take this country towards. So I feel like at the end of the day, I'm making a difference.
Hazel asked, what do you say to women who want to advance but do not believe enough in themselves?
That's a very good question. I would say that you have to come to recognize the brilliance that's in you. We all have brilliance within us, and it is coming to recognize that. I would suggest that that woman takes a moment to write a love letter to herself, and sit down and sort of write all of the things that you love about you. You can start with the superficial. Hey, I love your skin. I love your smile. I love your hair. Then you can move deeper. You know, I love how much you love other people. I love how hard you work. I love how smart you are. I love that you're there for people who count on you. Write a love letter to yourself. And I think if you go through that exercise, you'll begin to see that you have a lot to offer and you have a lot to be proud of. And through that process, eventually, I'm hoping that you'll be able to understand that you deserve the confidence that you're working towards.
Is it possible to encourage women or women to encourage her to experience positive transformations, or to encourage her to let me see how I can put this over. Is it possible to encourage women empowerment and transformation without asking her to interrogate her creation, like the principles and value systems that allow for her to be as she is, as she's treated? Is that it is?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because I think that life is is a journey. I'm not the same person today that I was yesterday, and I'm not the same person now that I'll be, 10 years from now. We're always transforming. We're always growing. I hope so. I mean, I feel like if you're doing it right, that's the whole idea, right? I mean, I feel like I'm easily twice the woman that I was 20 years ago. And I hope to be twice the woman when I'm 60 than I am now. 60 something. So I'm just saying that's the point of life. And so but the idea is that I also think that you have to be purposeful about that. Because even though we will change and grow and you will just learn things from life experience and from osmosis, if you take the time to direct your energy in a direction where you know you want to grow and you want to transform or you want to develop, just think about how powerful you can be when you do that. Therefore, the person that you will be tomorrow will be even more greatly in line with the vision that you have for yourself, with that dream that you have for yourself. I personally believe that you can really develop the life that you want to have, but you have to be purposeful about it. It doesn't happen by accident. However, it can happen over time. You have to invest the time in yourself. Women, we are notorious givers, and it's a wonderful thing to be a giver. But you can't give so much that you have nothing left for yourself. Even my dad, who I said is the emotionally intelligent one, and he is. Every time I speak to him on the phone, the last thing he says to me is, Avis, take care of yourself. You can't take care of anybody else unless you take care of yourself. And he's right.
Avis, I'm so tempted to ask you to let us continue. It's 9:30, and the show at one time used to be up to 10 o'clock, and I cut it down to 9:30. But the conversation is so rich, and I have so many more important questions to ask you. Would you like to stay on for a little while longer?
That's fine, sure.
Awesome. If a year from now, we were sitting here celebrating what a great year it has been for you as an author, as an advocate, someone who empowers women, what would we be celebrating for you?
We would be celebrating that my book is done. Yeah! I'm going to speak that into existence, right? We'll be celebrating that my book is done. We'll be celebrating the fact that I've been able to help women that more women than I even imagined, in terms of helping them to be able to build a life that they love, reaching their career success, reaching their home life success. Because that's really sort of the new passion, the transformation that I'm going into, not only doing the public policy stuff that I love, that I've been immersed in a couple of decades, but really helping women on an individual level create the life that they have imagined in their heads. And I just want to spend a second on that, because I think it's important that I not only focus on career here, I'm talking about building a life that's reflective of 360 degrees of success. And what that means to me is that you integrate your work life and your home life so that you create a reality that you love. That means being able to make sure that you create the time and space for you to have healthy relationships in your life. People who are going to lift you up and not tear you down. Having that time to spend with those children, the children that you love, while also, being able to find a way to integrate that into a way to do your work in a way that'll get you where you want to go. So helping women be able to navigate those challenges and building a complete life that they love. That's my sort of new passion that I'm developing out right now, and I absolutely love it.
Well, let's take a quick break.